Hello on this very stormy day, Michelle Gray. How are you doing? And my lovely boy, Eric, I love you both.
I'm doing good. Erik says, I love you, Mom, and I love you too. Erik's really happy to be here. And I have a microphone on today
Oh,
because
that is new.
everybody was commenting and mentioning, and Paula said to me, Michelle, you have to do something about your volume. And she's been so lovingly adjusting the volume for our videos, going in and
Woo!
doing it. And I am I will not lie when it comes to technical things. I cannot and am not the best with it. So I've been messing
Me
around with
too.
headsets and microphones, and I think I finally got one that works.
I mean, I
So
always thought it was fine,
yeah,
but what do I
yeah,
know?
yeah. So Paula, you're welcome.
Ah, all right. Hey, we are going to continue. I think this is part two or three. I'm not sure of our topic of witches, witchcrafts, and the Spanish Inquisition. So I have about 30 questions. Some of them are just real quick.
Okay.
All right, so ready to go?
Yep, we're
All right.
ready.
By the way, you guys write this down. It's thehealingh-art.com, but I'll remind you later. Eric, what were the life lesson of the good witches who were hunted down, and seems like these lessons are still following them in future reincarnations? Yeah.
What are the lesson? Well, a lot of the lessons that go forward from those that were um he says he wants to say like not even use the word witchcraft. He says practicing healing and connections with the earth and that's it,
Manifesting.
manifesting, because he says that's
Right.
really what it has been. um but he says what's carried forward is it comes from um when witches were being hunted down. He says a lot of those that were practicing witchcraft did in groups. They
Oh,
would go in groups. And so he says those groups, it was like, okay, well, we can't be together anymore. It's not safe for us to be together anymore
yeah.
because if they see us together, they're going to know what we're doing, or they're going to, you know, guess what we're doing. So a lot of them had gone to kind of be on their own. And Erik says this is where that belief of a witch being an old woman or a single woman alone,
Yeah.
because they started
Oh,
to separate themselves and
become
practice on their
solitary.
own. And
Yeah.
so he says, and what did that create? Well, it created many generations of being a hermit, of
Mm,
being tucked away,
yeah.
of hiding and trying to keep themselves safe. So, how did that evolve itself over many years into our current lives? Because many of us are the fractals of these souls that have gone through this. Is
Yeah.
he says it's hiding our abilities, not feeling like it's safe for us to be seen. He says things like confidence. He goes, confidence within who we naturally are. He says many people have walked the world in many generations with a
Yeah.
mask over them,
Yeah.
being who the world accepts during the day and being who we really are behind closed doors.
Absolutely. I mean, you see this in mediums, healers, etc. And they do get blowback, but all right, so well, this question is pretty much the same. Is it just manifestations and spell work that people did back then? I think spells that's thought creating reality, so that's a form of manifestation
Mhm.
of manifesting. So basically, I guess is witchcraft just manifesting? There's no woo to it. It's just law of attraction.
Well, he says, yes, if we want to get right down to it, it is manifestation, but there's more to it.
Really?
He says, let's put before manifestation, let's put belief, because truly belief is absolutely everything. And does belief create magic in your reality? Of course it does. And of course it can. Magic, miracles. So he says the belief system of a person who is practicing any type of spell work, no matter what they did, he says it is the strength of that belief and also He says the strength of the belief of the amount that believed it and say did it together. So he
Yeah.
says
Oh,
when we
yeah.
put more together with a belief. So if we have, Erik says, like modern day spell books, those have been handed down through many belief systems, and
Mhm.
a belief, an energy that is created cannot be destroyed. It can be transmuted, and so it grows, it
Yeah,
evolves.
look at Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief, how our beliefs can actually change our DNA. And look at
Yes,
Dean Radon, whatever his name,
yes.
who would have these random counters, count numbers, whatever, in different places of the world, and they would absolutely just totally become non-randomized because of collective thought. I don't know the exact thing of it, but yeah.
Yeah.
So collective thought. So were the women who hunted and were accused of being witches? Oh, they're going to bark because the trash people were here. Mostly innocent? Were they, or were they just spiritual slash psychic?
Well, he says a lot of them were, well, all spiritual. He goes, really, all beings were spiritual, as we all are. Um, he says, think of them as really no different than who we are today. It's the generation and the knowledge that was different.
Yeah.
It's the human condition and belief systems that were different at that time.
Okay.
But there really was no difference in the ability to foresee, to connect, to manifest. He goes, it just wasn't as widespread.
Okay.
The knowledge wasn't as great at the time.
Okay. We know a lot of innocent witches were put to death. Were some of them actually healers doing good for their community? Just yes or no, since I have more questions than I thought.
Yes.
Yeah. Are there still, here's another yes or no. Are there still powerful witches on the earth, like ancient ones?
Yes.
Oh. How many are there, you think?
Several, he says.
Okay. Here's one about the Spanish Inquisition. I'm going to say that one. What was the real reason behind the Salem witch trials and all that hysteria, Erik?
Well, the real reason behind all of it, and he says, if we're going to look at, are we going to look at the spiritual reason, he says, or are we going to look at the reason why it started in the first place? He says, well, it started from belief. He says,
Okay.
the belief of serving one God and fear. And he says, so the witch trials,
That thunder, Jesus. Okay, sorry.
that's fun. It's funny because he just says God's thunder. He goes, he's saying it like the belief system, but he says that it all came from the belief
Hey,
system of those that were um, different, or he says it came from a sickness, like people getting sick. He's talking about in Salem, and he says there's a belief that we don't understand this, so it must be. And it's because of the Christian faith. He said it had a lot to do with fear, but he's saying that it was not the same as like around the world, like he's showing in Europe, like there were slightly different reasons
okay.
why they were looking for the support of one religion.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of along the same. Why in Christianity is witchcraft considered a bad thing? I guess if you use your manifestation to do evil, yeah. But in general, why in Christianity do they consider it a bad thing?
Well, Erik is saying that in the well, he says for our understanding in the beginning of this, to say what was being taught, it really wasn't that witchcraft itself was being put on its own. He's saying that there was the belief of Christianity, like one God, we serve one God. And if you are
Oh,
serving another God,
I
if
see.
you are serving something other than this one God, then that's wrong.
Well, that makes sense. Did Jesus know how to, I said Jesus. Did Jesus know how to do witchcraft? If yes, did he do any rituals while he was still embodied? I mean, you don't need rituals to practice witchcraft, I guess. But anyway.
Yeah, he didn't do rituals like Erik says Jesus didn't have a like spells per se that he did or followed like that.
Fire,
But
dude. Put it in the black cauldron. Yeah, right.
he says that Jesus was taught like the healing ways, the path of a healer. He
Oh,
says Jesus had the path of a healer, and so he was taught in he calls them schools, like schools of teaching. So he was taught ways to he says manifest, and he's showing me a lot of water,
okay.
like using water, believe water, drink, the body. So Erik is saying that there's different ways that Jesus would use his words with water and certain items to
Mm.
be able to manifest and heal. And so in a way, yes, that is practicing without really giving a name to it. He didn't call that witchcraft or anything, but it is really a form of magic. He goes, it's generations of fear that has said that this is bad and this is
Yeah.
bad. Because again, over many generations, there was no true understanding to what it was. So there became so much separation.
Yeah. Well, how can we use water? I mean, we're 66 point whatever percent water in our own bodies. How can we use water to amplify our powers of manifestation? If we can.
Erik says our intent,
Okay.
our intent. So he says, for example, I'm going to tell every single one of you something you can do today, right in this moment, while we're talking, that will help you, help your body, help purify your body. So he says, take a glass of water. And he says, if you want to cleanse the water, he says, put your hand over top of the water. You can put a crystal in it if you want. Put your hand over top of the water and ask for that water to be blessed. Bless it with your higher power. Bless it with the higher version of you, with God, the universe, whatever you feel comfortable with, but infuse with your intention the clearing of that water. Now take that water and give gratitude to it and drink it. And as you're drinking it, he says, take a moment to feel that water going down your throat and into your body and cleansing. He says, that water is the purest form of cleansing in your body that you can have.
Yeah.
He says, as you pour it in, because there's a cellular structure, there's molecules. He says, water is flow.
Mm.
And because we are made up of water, because the earth has water, the moon, it runs, like everything is water. So
Yeah.
he says it is a conduit.
Right. I
And
mean,
we
the
can
moon has
change
great
its
power
form.
over the tides and all that kind of stuff. Just think about holy water, these places where people go to in the hot springs and whatever to heal themselves. It's all about the intention you put in it.
Mm-hmm.
Can witchcraft help anyone be more productive in their day-to-day tasks?
Of course, Erik says, of course it can. He goes, do you believe it? Because that's the big question. Do you believe it will work?
Okay,
If you
that's all
believe
there
it,
is.
yes.
Yeah. All right. Ooh, is scalar energy, is this practice of scalar energy a form of white witchcraft? I know it's not black witchcraft, people.
Well, he says that that's a label. Again, it's a form of healing. So if somebody believes that that's witchcraft, then they could believe that. But he says when you're doing your intent script,
Oh
he
yeah, and
says
my intent is
any,
so intense too.
right, he says any spelling, he says the spell, the spelling of words. He goes, if you want to call a prayer that you say witchcraft, he
That's
goes,
what witchcraft, yeah.
anything, it's the intention. Now, he goes, what's your belief of witchcraft? So if somebody is saying that and saying scalar energy is a form of witchcraft, well, if that person believes that witchcraft is negative, then no, scalar is not witchcraft.
Well,
He
they're
goes,
saying is it white witchcraft, which I kind of never heard of, but all right. So that's I
well,
guess good.
he just says that's the
Good
difference.
manifesting.
That's just the difference of doing something against, like for negative intention is dark witchcraft, and
Yeah.
white witchcraft is doing something with positive intention.
Okay.
That's all it is.
How can we know? This is a good one. My peeps are so brilliant. How can we know if evil spirits are around us? And how can we keep them away? Well, there are all sorts of prayers of protection, people, that I can share with you. But yeah, how do we know if evil spirits are around us?
Well, he said the thing is the first thing that you want to do, like for preventing, first of all, is he says your vibrational frequency is really how you prevent any kind of interaction with any lower vibrational um, spirits.
Yeah.
And he says, and how that is because when your vibration rises, you're no longer visible in that same frequency. So
Oh,
that's one way. He goes, but how would you know if there's one around you right now? He goes, well, chances are if you're being affected by a dark spirit, things will happen like you may not feel yourself. You may have lapses in your memory. Um, it can also affect you like sickness,
addiction,
behavior, addiction. He goes, there's
depression.
a lot of different things and a lot of people that have no idea.
I know.
He says that they've got an entity with them. And so he says, you know, how do you really practice keeping yourself clear? We have to first of all remember that fearing it is really not going to help you.
It's got to be a magnet and draw them
Right.
to you.
So he says, you want to do the things that help you know that you're safe. And this is something that Erik has talked about before many times when dealing with, like, as I'm speaking to people and with different clients, and they ask this question a lot.
Yeah.
And what Erik has always taught is that, you know, using your prayer of protection, your intent, doing your cleansing and all those things, you don't have to go overboard with that and be like, you know, I've got to do this every 5 minutes, or I've got to do
Right.
this, or something bad's going to come in. He says, remember, it all starts with your belief system. So if you feel protected by doing your cleansing, by doing certain things in your home, by putting a black tourmaline behind your back door, whatever you feel comfortable doing, if that makes you feel that I know I'm safe or I believe I'm safe,
That's going to
then you
work.
keep doing those things. He goes, but it will work whether you use one word, you cleanse a space and you use one word of protection. He says, because the thing is it's a momentum that builds within you.
Right.
It builds your vibration. The stronger your vibration is, then you're not going to be affected by those things. Um, this could, we probably shouldn't keep going on with this topic because it's a long one. Erik says we could get into all kinds of things
Okay.
with
Well,
this,
we
but
could always make it a different topic.
mhm.
Does sprinkling sea salt or Himalayan salt or whatever around your home really keep bad entities away? I'm guessing that's, well, if you think it will, it will. But
Yeah, but also Erik just wants to remind everybody too that when we were talking before about how there's collective belief, he says like there are properties within Himalayan salt and that
oh,
have cleansing properties to them. You
okay.
know, the same with like sage and Palo Santo, like they
Yeah.
have a collective belief with them, like
Mhm.
it's been used, and that collective belief is with that energy. So when somebody uses that, they're going to have that benefit
Oh,
of that energy. So if your belief system is not real strong with it, there's still that collective
yeah,
belief
because it's been
with it.
believed to be such for by so many for centuries, probably.
Right.
All right, so this is just a yes or no question. Is the deities of hoodoo, Hoodoo, I have no idea what that are they, is that a bad, are those bad entities?
Erik says some.
I have to look that up. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know what that is either, but he says some are, not all.
All right, and
Intent.
yeah, the same person wants to know if you have met the goddess of witchcraft, Hecate, Hekate.
Erik says among many others, yes.
What is she like? They want to know.
She's actually white.
Okay.
She's white, like a white glow is what I see, white
Oh,
glow of energy.
okay.
Mhm.
So it's a positive. She's a positive thing.
Um, Erik says that she's strong. He wants to put it that way. She's
Okay.
very strong. She's very
Well, I
strong.
mean, do you like her? Have y'all gone on any dates? I'm kidding.
Yeah, he says no dates. Um, uh, yeah, he says that he likes her. Um, but he's calling her like uh he says like salt and pepper. He says
Okay.
a little bit of it brings out the flavor in your food, but too much of it is way too strong.
Oh, okay.
So he says think of her like that.
Okay. I just see two numbers on this. What percent of Channeling Eric viewers were witches in a past lifetime? And what percentage were healers? So let's start with the witches. What percent, Eric?
Interesting.
That's cool.
Okay. Now he says, are you ready for this? Hold on to your hats, everybody. He says, so out of all of our channeling Eric community, he says, if we were to break them down, because many are from witches and healers alike. So he's showing it to me combined, but he
Yeah.
says there's actually a higher amount of healers, and he says that's at about the 80 to 85% of
Wow.
those that are part of channeling Eric.
Yeah.
Now he says that a lot of them are also witches because he says they really went hand in hand.
Oh, yeah, of
It really
course. I
wasn't
figured.
separated. Yeah.
So they were witches in another lifetime. Okay. Well, I know Kim Boyd. Well, I mean, she was Sarah Good, and she was
Mm-hmm.
shackled, and she in this lifetime has wrist pain. Really interesting. All right, I am a direct descendant of Mary Ayer Parker, who was executed by hanging in the Salem witch trials, September 22nd, 1692. Her daughter, Sarah Parker, was also accused. Apparently, Sarah got Mary exonerated by the court posthumously, so she had to die, and then she got off.
Mm.
Do I have a current relative who is Mary reincarnated? We do have psychics in our family that aren't open about their abilities. But anyway, is there some relative in her circle right now in her current life that is Mary reincarnated?
Yeah,
Mary,
there's a female Eric saying um a sister and an aunt are fitting with that energy. There's actually two that he's bringing forward that are
soul group?
from the same soul group, but he's showing me that it's not all like one reincarnation. It's they're fractals
Oh, okay.
come
That's what I
together.
felt. Yeah, when you said
And
there were two.
he's also saying to this person that asked the question that the questions that you ask, he's saying that like you're on the right track with what you believe. So whatever she's trying to figure out right now, or he, sorry, in this lifetime, um, Erik says keep following what
Okay.
you're doing because it has some purpose to writing or
You're on
something
the
in
right
this
track.
lifetime. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. To writing. Okay. It is said that many of the accused and tortured. Oh no, that's the Inquisition. I'll hold off on that. I was once told by a gifted psychic that the afterlife evolved just like Earth and any other beings. Is this true? Well, that's not part of witchcraft and stuff, but does the afterlife evolve?
Erik says yes, and he says, I want you to think of it this way. Creation, God, source, we call the creator. And so creation is not limited. And so as we explore, as we expand, so does everything else.
Yeah,
So does source. So yes, all of our experiences, uh, the many levels
that makes sense.
of energy equals, of course it does, because it's never contained and there's never an ending.
Yeah, I mean, God source, sent all of us out to have our little human experiences and evolve, and it sucks right back to God source, and so that God source can grow and evolve uh, by learning by acquiring from contrast
That's
polarity.
right. That's right.
I would also like to ask Erik about voodoo and his take on it. It would be interesting to talk to Marie Laveau, Laveau, and get her thoughts about witchcraft. But we could just start with, what do you think about voodoo? And I guess Marie Laveau must be somebody who practices. I'll look it up while you talk.
Um, Erik says this is actually he's calling them like a lot of family, like there's a lot of heritage to these practices. And he says there's a lot of secret to it.
Oh,
Like it's not something that's you might find a witchcraft or spell books available, but a lot of the stuff with voodoo is like passed down. It's like handed down.
okay.
Um, he says that there was a period of time, and it still exists, where there's a lot of curses. So he says there's a lot of protection that is placed, like voodoo, focusing a lot of protection on people. But there's also a lot of like putting bad things. He keeps showing me the voodoo doll, like
Yeah,
putting
that's what, it's like stick a pin in the voodoo
pin
doll.
it. Like so,
And it's like the person has a heart attack or whatever.
he's saying into and what he keeps showing me. So as he's talking to me, he's showing me like wooden houses. Like I'm seeing all of these wooden houses out in a field, and there's a woman burying like bones
Ooh,
underneath. Like I'm seeing this visual of it, and he's just saying that it's like uh he's calling it like a certain area of the world,
yeah.
or is like contained to a certain area, and he says it's very old.
Wow. Interesting. Well, this Marie Catherine Laveau was a Louisiana Creole practitioner of voodoo, herbalist, and midwife who was renowned in New Orleans. They also practiced, the daughter also practiced root work, conjure, Native American and African spiritualism, as well as Louisiana voodoo. And she had slaves.
Okay,
Wow.
that's
Yeah. Oh, the LaLaurie House. Maybe that's what it is. It's still a famous building in Louisiana due to her hideous actions against the slaves she owns. The show actively, that's the show, the defaming of Marie Laveau. The show accurately depicts the murderous LaLaurie conducting her actions of ripping slaves apart and keeping their bodies in cages in her attic. Jesus.
okay. So maybe that's the bones that he's showing me.
And
This
maybe
is
that's a
the
wooden house.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
hmm,
Hmm.
nice.
Hmm.
Okay, so well, what's the difference between voodoo and just putting a bad spell on somebody?
Well, he says that the voodoo has like a tradition to it. He's keeps showing me like handed down, a
Okay,
handed down tradition. So it really has more to do with the belief.
but it can be good or bad, or just
Yes, he
bad.
says it's known more for its negative, but there are many practitioners that are focus on other than negative.
So it's
But
like a spell
historically,
book,
there's a lot of negative to it. Yeah.
almost like spells handed down but secretly and kept in. Yeah, is that what you're talking about? And practice kind of in
Yes.
secret. All right,
Yes.
but it's basically manifestation, just like spells are.
It is. There's a lot of conjuring, he says. So he's showing like the invoking of spirits, like the invoking of
Oh,
and this is where he says it can get a little bit tricky because it's like you invoke a spirit and it starts to take on something completely different. So he says it's kind of a dangerous
yeah.
practice, which
It's
is
like
why it's
using
not just
tools of divination. I have one
yeah,
person that I need to work on that uh used the pendulum, but did not do anything to protect himself. And now, oh my God, the negative entities are just harassing him like
yeah.
there's no tomorrow. So, so basically, conjuring, you can conjure up Satan, the devil, tricksters, etc., right? With voodoo, if you wanted to.
Yes. It's a lot of they're showing me like praying to different spirits. Like,
Okay.
and some of these are names I don't recognize. Like, he's showing me what looks like a mask, like a mask that's worn for ceremony.
Okay.
And he's saying like praying to different deities. Um, Maybe not all were known for the best of things. And he says some of them not ever earthly, like never earthly, but there's some that have been on Earth.
Well, that's okay. We don't need to go into that,
Yeah.
but basically, it's like opening up a portal, right? So that things from other
Hmm.
dimensions, I mean, partly things from like negative entities, etc., can enter.
Yes. Yes.
Why does God allow someone to put curses on others? I don't think God, I mean, that's just free will, right?
God doesn't, of course, because Erik says, like anything else, God source has created the ability for each one of us to be able to make our own free will choices. And he says, a lot of people would say, well, how could a curse be put on somebody? Like, why would God allow that to happen? But Erik says, you know, each person in every party has the free will to put their intent in a negative or positive direction. But
Okay.
each one of us as individuals has the ability to believe whether we can accept them or not.
Yeah.
So he says, like, like, which in everything that you do, you always have the free will choice, but it's allowing us to have the experience, Erik says,
Okay.
not the stopping our choices.
Yeah. Right. Because this person's saying, you shouldn't interfere with the person's contract or their destiny in life. But anyway, well, is the witchcraft more effective in particular geographic areas like the US versus Africa versus, you know,
Well, it's he says all areas that you're talking of all have powerful areas. So, was there a, a group of people that had a lot of energy that was doing, like, they were doing something tribal in one location? Well, that location would have more energy. But if we're looking at it as a scale, he's actually saying that some places in the US and there are some spots in Europe that are like powerful. The energy is powerful coming from the earth because of what was done there. But he says, truthfully, there's really no one place that is like the best, most perfect place to
well,
do something.
does it, obviously it has something to do with what has occurred on the land,
Yeah.
black magic wise, dark, whatever, and white magic. But what about ley lines and vortices? Does that have anything to do with making some of these places a little bit more powerful for?
Of course it does. He
Okay.
says, yes, of course it does. And he says a lot of our ancient civilizations understood these things because they would follow the energy. They would use animals and nature to be able to direct them
Okay.
to certain spots. So they knew, especially water too.
Okay.
Erik says there's a lot of sacred space near water, again, for the same reasons why we spoke earlier.
Why were only, I don't know that this is true, but why only women were killed? Men do magic. What about them? No fair.
Erik says that there were men that were killed. Um, there were men. There were more women than men.
Why did they
The
hide it? Did the men hide it more? Or?
No, he says the women, they tended to congregate more in groups. So the men didn't always go in the larger groups. He's showing like men were often in a family unit or on their own
Okay.
with
Okay.
practicing.
I gotcha. Is it better to wait? What is the connection between magic and it's spelled with an ICK at the end? She says, or he, yes, with a K, and the spirit world. Does spirit activate magical with a K thinking? I don't know what magic with a K is, but we'll look it up later.
So the question is, does this spirit activate it, or are
Activate
they asking for?
magical. Yeah, what is the connection between magic with a K and the spirit world, basically, if any?
Well, what Erik shows me right away is miracles.
Okay.
Because think of it as miracles.
Oh, magic. Interesting. All right. Why are cats connected to witches and witchcraft?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so he says that if we trace back to earlier times, Egypt, and not only Egypt, other places as well, but Egypt, there was a lot of passion for cats. Cats were seen as magical, were
Yeah.
seen as powerful. They were leaders. They were very well respected and
Oh,
honored. And he says for a lot of their like having a foot into the spirit world, like a conduit for the spirit world.
no.
And particularly, he says, black cats, they had a
Yeah.
very distinct personality to them. And he says the cats, like, we're not talking about domestic cats either. He's showing me like very big black cats, and
Okay.
I don't know if they're like panthers. But anyway, he says so over generations, a lot of people that worked with magic or were connected to the spirit world were using their connection with cats, and cats then worked through over the generations as companions. And he
Oh,
says when we spoke a little earlier and talked about um, separating out of groups,
yeah.
he was showing me cats, so that there were cats around. When I see the group of women, there were a lot of cats, and he's just saying now those women would take a cat with them, or they would take the cats with them
They need
because they were
something.
good luck. They were
Oh,
good luck.
okay. Interesting. What about broomsticks then?
Oh, he says that the broomstick is more of a he's talking about it being a tradition, like jumping over the broomstick.
Oh,
And
there's
he's
some
saying the broomstick
ritual
had
that,
something more to
oh,
do with like cleansing spirit, cleansing
oh,
evil spirits, and not really riding around on the broom, that was something that was over
yeah,
time. It
was
was,
very
yeah.
expanded.
Mhm.
All right, just a couple more questions. How can we use our understanding of the historical persecution of witches to promote greater empathy and understanding in our contemporary world? Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make assumptions. These people were healers. Well, anyway, that's my take, but what do I know?
No, that's exactly right. Erik says, what can we take from it? Well, let's look at our world today, and we'll look at what we know about back then. And he says, judgment. He says, um, can we be of service today without judgment and without persecution? Being of service in our heart means that we're giving from our heart to another, believing from our heart to another, regardless of their belief, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their stature or status in life or how much money they have. He says, because all of these things that we've talked about are all based on judgments, even when we are looking at those that thought they were doing right because they were doing it for God. And he says, and there's many people that do believing that they're doing right by God.
Yeah,
But he says it's allowing, where's the humanity? Where
right.
is the humanity? And can you come from a place of being human, even if you don't agree with what that other person believes in?
Yeah,
He actually says a lot of what's happening in our world right now because religion and institution became married. And that is what we're playing out karmically right now, is
interesting.
religion and institution.
Interesting. And regardless of the warts on their noses, people, right? I want to know if you can do some special witchcraft for me, Erik. It's been raining for 2 weeks. I want to take the grandkids fishing with my husband on Saturday. Can you please make it not rain that day? Just open up a little window of
Okay,
sunshine.
so he says, Mom, he says, what I need you to do, I don't know if he's kidding or not. He's like, put your finger on your nose and spin 3 times and say, stop the rain, stop the rain, stop the rain.
It can't hurt. I'm going to try that. All right, now, three quick questions about the Spanish Inquisition. Eric, what is something or someone that is unknown about the Spanish Inquisition? I mean, there's been so much death in the name of many religions. It's just awful. All rude. Okay. So what is something or someone we don't that's completely unknown about it?
He actually says there weren't a lot of witches in the Spanish Inquisition.
Okay.
Um, he also says there, okay, the torture that many people went through,
Hmm.
he says the goal was often not what it was to maim, to get information out of somebody, not to take their lives. That it wasn't the intent of those, like, yes, it was terrible and it was torturous and people did die, but it wasn't their intent to take the lives of people. It was like getting information out of them. It was
Or
trying to get
maiming them so
information.
that they can go out in public and be an example.
They wanted it to be public. They
Yeah.
wanted it to be public so that other people would see
Okay.
the importance. One thing that he is saying is that there was an individual, and I don't know who it is. There was a male individual that traveled, that was connected to royalty, that was, he himself did not follow the Christian faith, and yet he was persecuting. And Erik says
Oh,
that is something that
what?
nobody knew.
Is there anybody on my half of my family is from Spain? Any links to the Spanish Inquisition? I hope I wasn't
Yes.
part of it. Oh God.
Yes.
Probably my father. He was probably one of the torturers.
Uh, actually, um, he's saying that your father was a medical doctor, that stood by. Okay, so he was a medical doctor that stood by them while they tortured. Um, they had medical doctors that were there, like, to say enough, or
Oh,
say
to prevent the
stop, or
death.
enough. Yes.
Yep.
And he was a medical doctor. You and Erik were both alive during that time frame as well, part of that time frame, because Erik shows the two of you out in the fields.
Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
But not a part of the Spanish Inquisition
No.
on either side? Okay. Are there any particular individuals, this is two last questions, or groups associated with witch hunts or the Spanish Inquisition whose stories or experiences are particularly worth exploring? Yeah, that's kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah, it is kind of an
There is
open-ended question, because Erik says there's a lot of
plenty,
stories. There's
plenty, yeah.
plenty of stories that come from that. He says that, it's kind of hard for us to get into particular stories without having one that we can just pull out. But what he says is that, with the Spanish Inquisition, he said there was, again, it was something that they thought they were doing right by God.
Yeah.
But he says that it was really, um, they were doing also what they were told to do. They were being pushed by royalty,
Oh, yeah.
or the
Right.
decisions of royalty.
Mhm.
Um, and he says, and there's a lot of, he says, if we had tabloids back then, there would be a lot of juicy details
Mm.
that would come forward, he says, in the happenings, the things that happened, and
Wow.
he says the treachery, like
Just
the
like the
lying.
Nazis. It's almost the same kind of thing. Persecution
Yeah.
against the Jews. All right. It is said that many of the accused and tortured
Yes.
souls.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to say anything on that?
No, I was just, he showed me, yes, I agree. He just showed me that.
Okay. One last question. It is said that many of the accused and tortured souls from the Inquisition carry their trauma down through following incarnations, although everything's happening all lives are at once. What effects do the cruel torturers or inflictors carry down through their incarnations?
Well, he says, really no different than anybody. He goes, because each person as an individual, what was their belief of what they were doing? So
Yeah.
if somebody is torturing another, he says, but they're being told by somebody who they believe God is telling them to do this
Okay.
to help them, then he says a lot of the torturers, their intent was to not harm, but Erik says you have to remember the culture was very different
Yeah.
at that time. Even imagining somebody doing that in this day and age is like, how could anybody think that that was right?
Yeah. Right.
But Erik says it was very different at that time. So the belief system around it and the intention would be different. So he says it would be carried forward, dependent on what is the belief of that person at the time and what did they carry forward? Well, if it was their belief was I'm doing the right thing, but it hurt them to watch somebody else hurt, then
Yeah.
they may carry forward guilt
Oh, yeah.
into that lifetime and into future lifetimes.
Yeah.
They would learn from that, but Erik says we have to always keep in mind what is the culture, what is going on at that time
Exactly.
with the beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, probably certain things seem very reasonable in certain centuries that we would think just are awful now. All right. Thank you very much. That is all I have. And you guys, again, check out Michelle, healer, medium, extraordinaire, thehealingh-art.com. You got to go fishing with us, Erik?
You got it, Mom. I already got my pole ready.
I never keep the fish. I let them go, and I really feel sorry for the shrimp when I put the live shrimp. I'm so sorry. And then thank you for your service. I tell that in the fish, but I think it's. I mean, I would eat them if if I like fish. Oh well. All right, guys. Thank you. Y'all
Thank
subscribe
you.
to this channel and the Atlanta Scalar channel, and also check out Michelle Gray's website. Love y'all.
Thank you. Love you. Erik says, love you, Mom. Love you, everybody.
Bye.